12 human beings have walked on the surface of the moon. 12. In all of human history. Every one of them went between 1969 and 1972. Then, humanity stopped. Not paused, not delayed. Stopped. For more than 50 years, no human being returned to the lunar surface. And the explanation most people received was simple. It was too expensive. Consider the scale of that claim. The United States government currently spends approximately $650 million every day on defense. The entire Apollo program, adjusted for inflation, cost less than what the Pentagon spends in roughly 6 months. The technology existed. The infrastructure existed. Public support existed. The missions had already succeeded repeatedly. 6 successful lunar landings. Then the program ended, and humanity never returned. In 2009, NASA launched the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Its purpose was to photograph the lunar surface in extraordinary detail. More than 2 million images were transmitted back to Earth. When independent researchers began examining those images closely, something unusual happened. NASA quietly reclassified raw image data from 12 specific regions. Those 12 regions corresponded directly to locations where Apollo astronauts had reported anomalies during surface operations. The reclassified imagery remains unavailable to the public. NASA's explanation cites data processing issues, 12 separate processing issues, across 12 specific regions, each one associated with an Apollo anomaly site. At a certain point, patterns become difficult to ignore. Something may have been discovered on the moon. Something significant enough to alter the direction of human space exploration. For more than half a century, discussion of that possibility has remained surrounded by silence. Tonight, we are examining the question directly. Let us begin with the Apollo missions themselves, because the official transcripts tell one story. The broader collection of communication records tells another. During every Apollo mission, communication between the astronauts in Houston traveled through a primary frequency accessible to amateur radio operators around the world. Anyone with the proper equipment could listen. NASA knew this. The public knew this. The arrangement was celebrated as transparency. Humanity's greatest technological achievement unfolding in real time before a global audience. But there was also a second channel, a medical telemetry channel officially designated for monitoring astronaut health, heart rate, blood pressure, respiration. Unlike the public channel, this one was encrypted and available only to NASA personnel. Multiple former communications technicians later claimed that the medical channel was frequently used for conversations not intended for public broadcast. Some spoke publicly, others remained anonymous. The allegation remained the same. Important discussions occurred where the public could not hear them. Former NASA employee Otto Binder collected testimony from independent radio operators who claimed they intercepted fragments of communication from this channel during Apollo 11. According to Binder's published accounts, the intercepted transmissions included references to objects visible on the lunar surface that did not appear geological in origin. One reported exchange attributed to Neil Armstrong during the lunar EVA referred to other visitors and described objects positioned beyond the rim of a crater. The transmission was brief, professional, the kind of language a trained pilot might use while reporting an unexpected observation. Armstrong never publicly confirmed the account. He never publicly denied it either. When questioned in later interviews, he typically redirected the conversation elsewhere. One statement in particular continues to attract attention. At a 1994 engineering symposium, Armstrong reportedly said the following: "There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers." Truth's protective layers. Not ignorance, not misunderstanding. Protection. a phrase suggesting something hidden rather than simply unknown. Now let us examine the 2-minute gap, because this is the moment many researchers point to when discussing inconsistencies in the official narrative. During Apollo 11's lunar descent, at the most critical stage of the mission, the public broadcast experienced an interruption. For approximately 120 seconds, the audience heard nothing. No partial signal. No static. Silence. 2 full minutes while the lunar module descended toward the surface and millions of people listened around the world. NASA explained the interruption as a technical issue involving signal processing and tracking station transitions. A routine communications problem. Nothing unusual. Former NASA communications chief Maurice Chatelain later offered a different interpretation. In a 1975 publication and subsequent interviews, Chatelain claimed the interruption was deliberate. According to his account, Apollo 11 encountered unexpected objects during descent, and NASA needed time to determine how the information should be handled before the public feed resumed. Chatelain stated that astronauts reported seeing structures near the landing area that appeared artificial. Whether those claims were accurate remains a matter of debate. What makes them significant is who made them. Chatelain was not an outside commentator. He helped design communication systems used during the Apollo era. He understood the equipment. He understood the transmission architecture. And for the remainder of his life, he consistently maintained that observations had been withheld from public discussion. He was not the only astronaut or aerospace figure to make unusual statements. Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell walked on the moon in 1971. After leaving NASA, Mitchell spent decades discussing the possibility of intelligent life beyond Earth. He founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences and became increasingly vocal about government secrecy surrounding unexplained phenomena. Before his death in 2016, Mitchell publicly stated that evidence supported the conclusion that the Roswell incident involved the recovery of non-human technology. Mitchell was not a casual observer. He held a doctorate in aeronautics from MIT and was the 6th human being to walk on the moon. Apollo 15 astronaut Worden also attracted attention for remarks made years after his mission. During a televised interview, he was asked about extraterrestrial life. His response surprised many viewers. "We are the aliens." When pressed further, Worden suggested humanity's origins might be more complicated than commonly assumed, and referenced ancient Sumerian traditions as worth investigating. Again, the statement came from a man who had traveled to lunar orbit and participated directly in one of humanity's most significant exploratory missions. Gordon Cooper, one of the original Mercury 7 astronauts and a United States Air Force colonel, spoke even more directly. In 1978, he addressed the United Nations and described UFO encounters he claimed to have witnessed during his military career. Cooper stated that intelligent beings from other worlds regularly visited Earth and called for an international investigation into the phenomenon. He also suggested that many astronauts avoided discussing such experiences publicly because they feared ridicule. These individuals were not selected randomly. They represented some of the most rigorously evaluated people in modern history. Military pilots, engineers, scientists. Individuals chosen specifically for stability, judgment, and observational accuracy under extreme conditions. And many of them spent years suggesting that humanity's understanding of what exists beyond Earth remains incomplete. Now let us move from testimony to photographs. Because while narratives can be disputed, images remain available for independent examination. During the Apollo missions, astronauts captured thousands of photographs using modified Hasselblad cameras. Most show exactly what you would expect: dust, rocks, equipment, footprints, lunar horizons. But among those Thousands of images are a small number that continue generating discussion decades later. One example often cited is frame AS12-46-6847 from Apollo 12. The image appears to contain an object on the horizon, casting a geometric shadow. Some analysts argue the shape resembles a rectilinear structure. NASA catalogued it simply as an unnamed terrain feature. Another frequently discussed image is frame AS15-88-11967 from Apollo 15. Researchers examining the photograph have pointed to what appear to be parallel linear formations extending across several kilometers of terrain. NASA classified them as geological surface features. Independent analysts remain divided regarding their significance. Perhaps the most discussed image is frame AS17-135-2062 from Apollo 17, the final lunar landing mission. The photograph appears to show an angular feature partially embedded within lunar soil. Several independent examinations have argued that the geometry cannot be explained entirely by lighting conditions or camera perspective. NASA has never issued detailed commentary regarding the image itself. What researchers often find most intriguing is not the photographs alone. It is the absence of surrounding context. In several cases, images taken immediately before or after unusual frames are listed as unavailable, damaged, or missing from public archives. The anomalous image remains. The surrounding sequence does not. Whether this pattern reflects ordinary archival issues or something more significant remains an open question. But it is one reason these photographs continue attracting attention. Let me ask a simple question. If you discovered something extraordinary on the moon and wanted to prevent the public from reaching the same conclusion, how would you do it? You would not necessarily remove every photograph. That would attract attention immediately. Instead, you would remove context. You would leave behind an ambiguous image while making sure the surrounding images that might explain it were unavailable. The puzzle remains. The pieces needed to solve it disappear. Whether that is what happened remains unproven. But it is precisely why these photographs continue generating debate decades later. Now let us shift from the Apollo era to the present. Because the moon is no longer a place where only one nation can control the narrative. In January of 2019, China's Chang'e 4 mission became the first spacecraft to land on the far side of the moon. The far side is permanently turned away from Earth. No human being has ever stood there. No direct observation from Earth is possible. For generations, it remained one of the least explored regions of the lunar surface. Within weeks of the landing, Chinese space agencies released a series of images. Several of those images later disappeared from official distribution channels. Independent researchers archived copies before removal. The images appeared to show unusual geometric formations near the von Karman crater region. Initial descriptions referred to unexpected geological discoveries. Later references vanished from public discussion. No detailed explanation followed. The Chang'e program continued. Discussion of those specific images did not. Another event attracted global attention in 2021. China's Yutu-2 rover photographed what media outlets quickly labeled a mystery hut on the lunar horizon. The object appeared cube-shaped from a distance and generated widespread speculation. Weeks later, after the rover reached the location, officials announced that the object was simply a rock formation, a naturally occurring feature. The story disappeared from headlines almost immediately afterward. Yet many observers remained interested because of how unusual the object appeared during initial observations. India's Chandrayaan missions have contributed another important piece to the puzzle. These missions identified extensive lava tube networks beneath the lunar surface. Some of these underground passages are enormous, large enough to contain entire cities. protected from radiation, shielded from temperature extremes. Ideal environments for future human settlements. Researchers have also identified thermal anomalies within several of the largest formations. Areas where temperatures differ from surrounding rock. The data itself has been published. Interpretation remains ongoing. No definitive explanation has yet emerged. Now notice how several developments begin occurring within a relatively short period of time. In 2019, the United States established the Space Force as an independent military branch, a dedicated military organization focused on space operations. At the time, no publicly acknowledged threat existed that seemed to require such a structure. No active space conflict. No known hostile force operating beyond Earth. Yet the organization was created anyway. Then came Artemis. In 2020, NASA formally accelerated plans to return humans to the Moon. After more than 50 years of absence, lunar exploration suddenly regained urgency. New timelines appeared. New funding arrived. Partnerships expanded across multiple nations, including Europe, Japan, and Canada. The objective was no longer a brief visit. The objective became long-term presence, permanent infrastructure, sustained operations, a return designed to stay. At nearly the same time, public discussion of unidentified aerial phenomena expanded dramatically. Government investigations became public. Congressional hearings took place. Classified briefings were provided to lawmakers. Several senators emerged from those briefings describing the information as concerning or alarming. Subjects once dismissed as fringe speculation suddenly became part of official government discussion. Many observers treat these developments as unrelated events. A military branch. A lunar program. Government attention toward unidentified phenomena. 3 separate stories. But some researchers argue they may represent different aspects of the same larger shift. If that interpretation is correct, then the question becomes obvious. What changed? And why did it change now? Consider the possibility that these developments are connected. Not necessarily through a conspiracy, but through a shared discovery. Suppose Apollo astronauts encountered evidence suggesting that humanity was not the first intelligence to visit the Moon. Not a functioning extraterrestrial city. Not a populated base. Something older. Artifacts. Structures. Technology. Evidence that another intelligence had reached the Moon long before humanity arrived. Such a discovery would have created an extraordinary dilemma. In 1969, the world was in the middle of the Cold War. Religious institutions, governments, and societies were built around assumptions about humanity's place in the universe. A confirmed discovery of non-human technology beyond Earth could have transformed those assumptions overnight. The consequences would have been impossible to predict. If officials believed the public was unprepared, one possible response would have been delay. Classification. Silence. Time. Time to study the discovery. Time to understand its implications. Time to determine how such information might eventually be disclosed. For more than 50 years, humanity remained absent from the lunar surface. Meanwhile, technology advanced. Space capabilities expanded. Military space infrastructure developed. International partnerships formed. Public discussion surrounding unidentified phenomena gradually increased. Then, suddenly, humanity began preparing to return, not for a brief visit, for a permanent presence. At the same time, other nations began making discoveries of their own. China reached the far side of the Moon. India mapped underground structures and thermal anomalies. Multiple countries gained independent access to lunar data. A secret controlled by one nation becomes much harder to maintain when several nations begin examining the same place. If multiple governments are independently discovering unusual things on the moon, the challenge changes. No longer keeping a secret. Managing disclosure. Managing interpretation. Managing public reaction. This interpretation remains speculative. There is no public document proving such a discovery occurred. No official confirmation. No declassified report providing a definitive answer. But it does offer one possible explanation for several otherwise unusual facts. Why humanity abandoned the moon after achieving repeated success. Why discussion of lunar anomalies continues decades later. Why so many astronauts spent years hinting that reality may be stranger than commonly believed. And why the urgency to return appears stronger now than at any point since Apollo. The moon sits approximately 238,000 miles away. Close enough to dominate the night sky. Close enough that generations have looked up at it and imagined what might be waiting there. 12 people walked across its surface, all within a period of just 3 years. Then humanity stayed away for half a century. Many astronauts spent the later years of their lives encouraging people to ask larger questions. Questions about intelligence. Questions about origins. Questions about what may exist beyond Earth. Whether those questions connect directly to the moon remains uncertain. But the questions themselves remain. If the possibility of non-human presence on the moon has you wondering what else might be hidden beyond public view, there are other investigations worth exploring. One possibility lies beneath Antarctica's ice. Another may involve the strange ways consciousness itself appears to interact with reality. Both raise questions about how much humanity truly understands about the world around it. Look up tonight. The moon is there. It has always been there, watching over every generation that has ever lived. The question was never whether humanity could reach the moon. The question may be what humanity found when it got there, and whether we are finally ready to ask why we stayed away for so long.